The sun burned heavy that afternoon, the kind of heat that stuck on the back of your neck and made the ice melt before you finished the drink. Smoke from the pit drifted over the fence, brisket fat dripping, hissing on the coals. Folding tables from Walmart sagged under potato salad bowls and store-bought pies. Red Solo cups clinked as cousins leaned against lawn chairs. Dan leaned his shoulder on the side of his new Ford F-150, polished so clean it caught the glare. His voice carried over the yard, louder than it needed to be. He said, "Mike's still in his garage with that scrap metal. Dreamer forever." Laughter rolled across the group. Even the neighbors joined in. Tricia pressed her McDonald's sweet tea against her lips, hiding the curl at the corner of her mouth. A silent office. Blinds drawn. Empty chairs pushed back from a mahogany desk. The sound of ribs shifting on a paper plate brought me back. I adjusted my daughter's food, passing her corn from the grill. She didn't look up, too busy squeezing ketchup onto her hot dog. I wiped my fingers on a thin paper towel, eyes flicking to the old wrench resting near the garage door. Rust caught the sunlight like a dull scar. I stepped to the cooler, lifted the lid, and the hiss of crushed ice met my hand. A Dr. Pepper can, sweating cold, pressed into my palm. I stayed quiet. Listened. Each word from him cut, clean and steady. I whispered more to myself. One day. Dan's hand dropped on my shoulder, heavier than it needed to be. The jolt sent ribs sliding across the flimsy plate. His grip lingered, fingers tight, claiming space. He said, "Why don't you just admit it? Your little side project will never pay the bills." I replied, "It pays enough." She said, "Enough for gas, maybe." Her laugh was sharp, her eyes away from mine. The noise dipped. Even kids slowed, water balloons clutched, waiting for the next strike. The can in my hand bent under my grip, metal creasing with a soft crack. Dan stepped to the bench by the garage, lifted the wrench, and held it up like a prize. He said, "See this? Our dad built houses with tools like this. Mike? He plays with them." Laughter again. Less sharp this time, but still loud enough. I walked over, took the wrench back without hurry. Set it down. The steel clinked against the wood. No words. The same wrench, months later, placed gently on a desk. A clock ticked in an empty Dallas office. The hiss of the grill filled the silence again. Charcoal cracked. Dan grinned, teeth bright in the fading light. Tricia stood near him now, body angled toward his voice. She wasn't just laughing. She was nodding. The risk was more than pride. My daughter's eyes followed, catching the way her mother leaned. I didn't move. She stepped closer, her voice low, sharp enough to cut. She said, "Maybe you should think about selling that license to Dan. For once, do something smart." I didn't answer. My hand rested on the wrench. My thumb brushed the steel, cold and steady. A locked door rattled months later. Silence pressed heavy inside a bank office. The hiss of the grill carried on. Dan's laugh pushed across the yard, echoing longer than it should have. My grip held, the metal unyielding. The paper handles of the Walmart bags dug into my fingers as I set them down on the porch. The smell of fried chicken still clung to the cardboard box, grease soaking faint circles at the corners. The street was quiet, except for cicadas buzzing from the oak trees and the occasional Ford rolling past with headlights cutting the dusk. Emma sat on the steps, a Dr. Pepper can balanced in her hand. The red paint glowed faintly under the porch light, condensation dripping down her fingers. She watched the passing cars, her hair catching the yellow glow. She said, "Dad, I heard Uncle Dan bragging again, but he's wrong." The street stilled. Even the insects seemed to pause. I leaned closer, adjusting my glasses, keeping my voice low. I replied, "What do you mean?" Her eyes stayed on the asphalt, where the reflection of the streetlight trembled in a shallow puddle left by the sprinklers. She spoke without turning. She told me things I wasn't supposed to hear from her. Things about city trucks, depots, and fathers who worked them. Each word landed harder than the next. My pulse echoed louder than the cicadas. a thud in my ears. I stepped back toward the garage, my hand brushing against the wrench on the bench. The steel felt cool even in the heat, its weight anchoring me. She said, "Your software runs half the city trucks. Kids at school know. Their dads work at the depot. Why do you let him humiliate you?" I replied, "Because fighting him costs more than staying quiet." She said, "No. Staying quiet costs us more." "Costs you me?" Her words didn't fade. They stayed, heavier than the humid air. The porch light flickered once, buzzing, then steadied again. I looked at her. She looked back, and the soda can in her hand bent under her grip, aluminum groaning before it popped. Computer screens froze in a Dallas warehouse. Truck drivers cursed into radios, voices breaking over static. I blinked. Emma's face filled my sight, her jaw set, her eyes too sharp for her age. Inside, the screen door creaked. Tricia passed through the kitchen, the faint clink of her bracelets following her. On the counter, her Wells Fargo checkbook lay open, the pen still pressed between the pages. She paused in the doorway, voice sweet and dismissive. She said, "Emma, don't fill your dad's head with nonsense." Emma rolled her eyes, muttering as she crushed the can flat against her knee. She said, "At least he built something real." Tricia didn't answer. She turned the faucet on, rinsing her hands as if the conversation hadn't touched her. The sound of water hitting the stainless sink filled the gap. I watched the checkbook. Numbers on the edge of the page, neat columns in blue ink. Her handwriting, curved and exact. Emma stayed still. She looked back at me, not at her mother, not at the empty road. Her face carried something that weighed more than words. She said, "If you don't fight him, I will. I'll tell everyone what's really yours." A radio in a dispatcher's booth clicked once, silent before voices rose. I gripped the wrench harder. The steel edge pressed into my thumb, sharp against the skin. The streetlight above hummed, louder now, filling the silence with its warning. The kitchen light buzzed faintly, throwing a weak circle across the linoleum. The house was quiet, the kind of silence that pressed into your ears late at night. The smell of old McDonald's fries drifted from the trash, stale salt clinging in the air. I walked past the counter, careful not to step on the loose tile that always popped. That was when I heard it. A voice low from the den. The door was half closed, light seeping through the crack. She said, "Dan, relax. We'll finally get rid of his little license problem." Laughter followed. Not hers. His. Dan's voice carried clear through the speakerphone, dripping with mockery. I froze against the frame, every muscle locked. My hand gripped the wood until it creaked. My other hand slid into my pocket, pulling out the phone. One tap. The red dot blinked. I held it steady, catching every word I could. On the desk inside, her laptop screen glowed. A Wells Fargo calendar reminder sat open, a date circled in red. My eyes fixed on it, the detail burning into memory. I stepped back slowly, the sound of her ice cubes clinking filling the gap. My shoes stayed silent against the linoleum as I moved toward the garage. The air smelled of motor oil and dust. My hand found the wrench. Cold. Heavy. Steadying. Dan's voice broke the distance, sharp even through the wall. He said, "He's too weak. By next month, we'll own it all." Her voice followed, calm as pouring tea. She said, "He'll sign whatever I put in front of him." I whispered, low enough not to carry. "Not this time." The sound of glass on the counter made me flinch harder than it should. The betrayal wasn't loud. It was casual, like it had always been there. She ended the call. The den door opened. She walked into the kitchen, humming some tune from the radio earlier. She poured Coke over ice, the fizz drowning the silence. She looked at me standing near the counter, her smile practiced. She said, "Mike, you're still up? Don't stress over your projects." I replied, "Yeah. Just checking things." Her eyes flicked past me, uninterested, like she'd already left the conversation. Servers blinked red in a Dallas warehouse. Men shouted over radios. forklifts screeching against concrete. Back in the garage, the paperwork sat untouched, edges curling in the heat. I stared at it, then back at the wrench. The line between them felt thinner now. She came back from the hallway carrying a folder. The manila edges looked too clean, too official. She set it on the counter, a yellow sticky note stuck across the top. In black marker, signed tomorrow. She smiled, too bright for the hour. She said, "Dan will be so relieved when this is over." Her footsteps trailed down the hall. The hum of the fridge filled the silence, louder than anything else in the house. Emergency lights flashed against concrete. Forklifts stopped mid-line. Sirens echoed through the warehouse. I didn't move. My fingers brushed the wrench again, pressing against the steel until my skin cooled. My eyes stayed on the folder. It waited silent, heavier than her words. The garage smelled of motor oil and dust, the air heavy and stale from the night. I pulled open the drawer of the old metal filing cabinet, hinges squealing, and shuffled through yellowed papers, their edges curled and soft. Sunlight sliced through the blinds, drawing stripes across the concrete. My fingers paused on a folder thicker than the rest, its corner stamped with Wells Fargo payment slips. I laid it flat on the workbench, spread the contents wide. Receipts crinkled beneath my palms. The state seal pressed into the renewal form caught the light, sharp and undeniable. My name stared back at me from the signature line. Not his. Mine. The laptop whirred as I opened it, the fan pushing warm air across my wrists. The state registry loaded slowly, each page lagging as if it knew the weight of what it held. Ownership field, Michael Lawson. Still mine. I pulled my phone, snapped the license page, the folder, the records. Sent them to Houston. The message was short, letters plain against the screen, need confirmation. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead hours later. The lawyer in Houston leaned back, pages spread across his desk, the smell of burnt coffee drifting from a forgotten mug. His finger tapped the embossed seal, firm, certain. He said, "This license is yours. They've been operating illegally without your consent." I replied, "So if I pull it?" He cut me off, eyes steady. He said, "The whole system goes dark. Trucks, clients, everything." Silence stretched, broken only by the low drone of the AC pushing recycled air. I folded the papers back into the folder, the weight sharper now. Outside, the heat slammed into me like a wall, Texas sun burning my skin through the shirt. Asphalt shimmered under my shoes. My phone buzzed, her name flashing across the screen. I answered. Her voice was light, almost playful. She said, "Did you handle that little bank thing for Dan?" I replied, "Not yet." She sighed, short and sharp, then hung up without goodbye. Rows of trucks sat idle, their headlights dark, warehouse alarms flickering red. A foreman shouted into the void, "We can't process orders, nothing's moving." Back in the parking lot, the folder cut into my grip. Sweat soaked the edges of the paper as I held it against my chest. The weapon sat in my hands, silent but loaded. By the time I drove back, the sky had dimmed, the house lit by the dull glow of kitchen bulbs. A new envelope waited on the table, white against the wood, edges crisp. I slid it open, the paper inside smooth and fresh. Dan's company letterhead printed across the top. Blank signature line waiting below. She stood in the doorway, her tone even, her smile careful. She said, "Sign it tonight. Dan's sending a notary." The envelope landed on the counter beside the wrench, their edges almost touching. I didn't move. The clock on the wall ticked, louder than her footsteps as she walked away. Server rooms flashed with warning lights. Dispatch radios spat static. Forklifts sat frozen mid-aisle. I kept my eyes on the paper. My hand stayed close to the steel. The garage stayed warm long after the sun went down. The desk fan hummed, pushing stale air that smelled faintly of motor oil. I sat at the workbench, laptop open, inbox glowing in the dim light. Renewal reminders blinked red on the screen. I didn't click. I let the timer count down, second by second. A banker in a Wells Fargo lobby argued with Dan, his voice cracking as the screens behind the counter froze. The cursor pulsed. I leaned back, listening to the fan blades slice the silence. Urgent messages stacked in the corner of the inbox. I marked them unread. I dialed the license help desk, the hold music a thin piano loop. When the line clicked, the voice was steady, rehearsed. He said, "We show the license under Michael Lawson only." I replied, "That's all I needed." The call ended. I drove to Walmart, aisles buzzing with fluorescent lights, carts rattling across tile. I filled a basket with bread, milk, paper towels. My phone vibrated twice in my pocket. I didn't look. I pushed the cart past seasonal displays, ignoring the buzzing until it stopped. At home, I left the papers on the dining table, pages spread wide. The signatures were half finished, black ink trailing off. The light from the overhead lamp cast sharp shadows across the forms. I let them sit where she would see them. Dinner smelled of grilled chicken, ketchup packets torn open on the counter. Tricia sat opposite, her fork tapping against the plate. She said, "Dan needs this cleared. Just sign it already." I cut another piece of chicken, slow, steady. I replied, "Deadlines aren't my problem." Her voice rose, sharper than the knife in my hand. She said, "Do you want this family to look like fools?" I kept my tone level, the fork moving to my mouth. I replied, "Maybe I'm done looking like one." The clatter of silverware filled the silence that followed, louder than words. She looked away first. The living room glowed from the television. I stepped inside, the anchor's voice cutting through. Trucks stretched across Dallas freeways, red lights blinking against the night. The anchor said, "Technical delays continue at Lawson Logistics." I smirked faintly, the corner of my mouth hidden in the dark. Dan's Ford Explorer sat crooked in a parking lot. He slammed the wheel, phone pressed hard against his ear. He said, "Why won't he sign?" The kitchen was quiet when I returned. The drip machine hissed as coffee filled the glass pot. I poured a mug, steam rising into my face. The taste was bitter, the warmth steady in my throat. The house felt different. Her loyalty wasn't hidden anymore. Each word from her carried his echo. The war wasn't just across cities now. It sat at my table. It was late when she walked into the garage, folder in her hand. She dropped it on my desk, her finger pressing against the blank line. She said, "If you don't sign tomorrow, don't expect me to stay here." I closed the folder without looking. My thumb rested on the steel wrench, cool against my skin. The garage light flickered once, buzzing louder than her footsteps as she left. Screens glowed red in a dark warehouse. Forklifts stood silent, alarms pulsing in the distance. The bulb above me hummed like it could burst. I didn't move. The Dallas warehouse lights flickered, alarms buzzing like wounded insects. Forklifts sat motionless, their dashboards glowing useless red. Drivers slammed fists on steering wheels, radios crackling nothing but static. Voices rose, breaking into curses, echoing against corrugated walls. Dan's Ford Explorer idled crooked near the loading dock. Sweat rolled down his temple, shirt sticking dark under the collar. He slammed the steering wheel, phone pressed hard to his ear. He said, "Why the hell isn't anything moving?" In Austin, my garage stayed still. The bulb above hummed, a faint tremor in its filament. I sipped black coffee from a Walmart mug, bitter and burnt, steam fogging my glasses. The license dashboard glowed on my laptop, status lines shifting one by one. Access denied? Access denied? Each entry bled red. I closed the screen with steady hands. No rush. My palm rested on the wrench, steel cool, grounding. The phone vibrated across the workbench, Dan's name flashing. I let it ring. I let it stop. The garage door rattled hard against its frame. Perfume entered before she did, sharp, too heavy for the hour. Tricia stormed in, eyes lit with panic. She said, "You don't understand, Dan needs this sign now." I replied, "Dan needs a miracle. I'm not it." She stepped closer, her voice breaking, words thrown like glass. She said, "I trusted him with everything. He promised." She stopped. Too late. The silence cut sharper than her shouting. I replied, "Everything? Or just yourself?" The fan rattled in the corner, blades wobbling against the cage. Her eyes flicked away, shoulders tight, throat tight. The silence weighed more than any answer she could give. The phone lit again. I pressed speaker, said nothing. Dan's voice poured through, jagged, frantic. He said, "Trisha, you said he'd fold? You said he'd sign." I watched her face pale under the yellow light. She gripped the checkbook still open on the counter, pages bent from use. Her fingers pressed so hard the ink smudged beneath them. A news anchor's voice carried over muted television screens. The anchor said, "Lawson Logistics files emergency bankruptcy protection." I placed the phone face down on the bench. Its vibration dulled against the wood, still buzzing, still desperate. I sipped the cooling coffee, the taste gone sour, the garage air thicker now. Dan's empire crumbled in Dallas, but my house burned quieter. The war moved closer. She wasn't just complicit. She was exposed. The phone beeped with voicemail. I didn't touch it. The speaker blared on its own, Dan's voice broken, trembling with rage. He said, "If you don't fix this, you'll regret it. Both of you." Her whisper barely left her lips. She said, "Mike, we're not safe anymore." I kept my eyes on the wrench, thumb brushing its cold edge. The garage light flickered, buzzing harder, like it might burst. The message replayed, distorted, looping his threat into the silence. The Dallas Tower lobby smelled of burnt coffee and sweat. Dan pushed through the glass doors, suit wrinkled, collar damp. His eyes were bloodshot, his tie crooked. Security guards leaned near the desk, voices low. He said, "Company's finished." Screens across the reception glowed the same words, "System offline." The hum of silence replaced the usual chatter of phones. At a McDonald's drive-thru, truck drivers leaned out of windows, voices sharp. He said, "Whole operation's dead. No paycheck." I drove east in my Ford pickup, highway heat blurring the edges of the road. The old wrench sat wrapped in a rag on the passenger seat, its weight steady. Houston's skyline rose slow on the horizon. The Wells Fargo boardroom was glass and chrome, the air sharp with the smell of toner and brewed coffee. Papers stacked in front of me, signatures pressed deep in blue ink. I counted each page, each seal, each copy. My name printed clear, final. The competitor's hand shook mine across the table, his watch catching the light. Outside, the Texas sun pressed down, heat shimmering off parked cars. I put on sunglasses, walked through the roar of traffic without looking back. Dan's office blinds hung half-closed, light striping across scattered papers. He stormed in, face red, veins raised. I was already inside. The wrench lay on his desk, steel dull against mahogany. He said, "You ruined me. You could have saved me." I replied, "It was never mine to save." He slammed his fist on the desk, papers jumping. I didn't move. The air conditioner rattled weakly in the ceiling. The door flew open. Trisha stumbled in, makeup smeared, purse clutched tight. Her voice cracked, desperate. She said, "Dan, tell me we still have something." Dan shouted, spittle flying, "We have nothing!" Her head turned toward me, voice sinking low, almost begging. She said, We can fix this." I picked up the wrench, heavy in my grip, and walked past her without a word. Her perfume trailed behind me, already fading. 1 year later, I sat in a small Austin bar, wood-paneled walls smelling of beer and smoke. Emma sat beside me, sipping soda through a straw, the bubbles popping against the plastic lid. The TV above the counter showed his face, older now, eyes hollow. The anchor said, "Former CEO Daniel Lawson faces lawsuits, assets frozen." I raised my glass, beer warm, foam clinging to the rim. A faint smile traced my lips. Evening light cut through dusty blinds back home, the garage warm with silence. The wrench sat where it belonged, cold steel catching the last ray of sun. The door rattled once, then again, her voice thin on the other side. She said, "Mike, please, just talk to me." I closed the door slow, the latch locking with a click. The sound carried longer than her words. Silence was all I wanted.